welcome to the stage Moji Karimi.
Thank you. So, I know we're at the conference called Energy Disruptors, but I'm curious, how many of you actually feel like a disruptor in your own industry? Raise your hand if you feel like a disruptor in your own industry. All right, quite a few. What about an outsider? Do you feel at times like an outsider in your own industry? You are my people. Welcome. My name is Moji, and this is Outsiders Anonymous. The truth is, to be an outsider is actually not as much about being inside or outside an industry. It's more about the way you think. It's the superpower, actually, to be able to see a problem from close, understand it, but then to be able to liberate yourself from the experience of being close to the problem so that you could think of the solution or a different way to approach that problem. And today, I would love to share with you my thoughts on a framework that I have developed in the actual work that we do for this. And this is something that I call Inside Out, Rethinking Innovation for the Future that we want. Outsiders are the superheroes that our industry, energy industry, needs more than ever right now. It's because without innovation, the energy transition just would not happen. Outsiders are people who think of ideas that are going to bring about the revolution that we need to create. Because the demand for energy is only increasing, and it would even increase more down the road. Yet today, it's still 80% of power generation comes from fossil fuels. So we're not talking about tweaking the system. We're talking about a complete redo of the system if we are able to create this revolution that is needed. Completely new ways of producing sustainable molecules and electrons. But you may think, why is it that the incumbent industry, the big oil and gas companies, energy companies, how come they haven't done this already? How come they're not leading this new version of an industry that they have pioneered in the first place? I have a theory about this, and this is something that I call pioneer's paradox. I think our industry suffers from pioneer's paradox. It's basically past success breeding complacency. And that, in turn, makes industries and companies vulnerable to disruption from outside. And that is really what is been happening. History is littered with companies who were pioneers in their industry, but they failed to create their next revision, so they were disrupted from outside. Now, to understand why is pioneer's paradox happening, how could we get past this? How could we not settle with incremental improvements and be able to create transformative innovation? We need to understand the context that has allowed pioneer's paradox to thrive in our industry. I've thought of 3 specific issues that has led to this, and I would like to share those with you. And don't worry, I also have solutions at the end. We have a talent utilization problem in our industry. What I mean by that is big companies have a lot of entrepreneurs at heart, people with passion, with expertise, but they're really not utilized. So a lot of them, they end up leaving. Now, to understand this, we have to look at history of structural innovation in our industry, in oil and gas and energy. You see, before 1980s, big companies like Amoco and Texaco, they had massive R&D departments. They do a bulk of the innovation themselves. Because of the downturn in 1980s, a lot of the top talent moved from operators to service companies. And as part of that, big companies have started to rely more and more on service companies like Schlumberger, Baker Hughes, Halliburton for innovation. And to date, it's still a very much established method for how innovation is done. But the other thing that changed from about 20 years ago with the advent of startups, big companies realized, okay, we need another way to play in this, and that's where we started to see CVCs popping up. It's starting with Chevron and BP, but as of 5 years ago, almost all companies have CVCs. And in the past 5 years, we've also had hundreds of energy transition and climate tech startups entering the market. You know why? Because it's not hard to start a company anymore, right? It's not like before. As a matter of fact, a lot of these startups are created by former employees of big companies. Why are they leaving? Because people want equity, and the golden handcuffs are just not working anymore. And so this is a problem for big companies, unless if they come up with a structural way to be able to give people a skin in the game. And so this is leading to some of that thinking and then reshifting the way innovation is done in our industry as a whole. The other problem is that if you look at a lot of the Bibles for innovation and entrepreneurship, you come across 0 to 1, hard things about hard things, and lean startup. This is what is used for the most part to build companies and to raise money and everything, right? But these are all great if you're building software. If you're creating the next battery storage company, if you're creating a new way to produce hydrogen, if you're developing a new way to scale carbon capture and storage, and you go off of these principles, it's like bringing a butter knife to a sword fight. Those things just take much longer, and it takes a lot more capital, right? But we still keep using them, and this is the time where we need a new framework for deep tech. These new rules that we have inherited from software just don't work anymore. And time is a big issue. In deep tech and hard tech, the speed we're talking about, the speed of science and engineering, developing the infrastructure, regulatory shifts, right? So we need a new framework that applies to us. The third problem that I have noticed is that our industry, for the most part, is being quite reactive, actually. And when we do think about the future, it's mostly limited to forecasting. I personally sat through many presentations by McKinsey and Deloitte and others, and they always show graphs just to miss a driver for what is making the trend, and that would lead to a very different future. And we're just so used to it. We need a new framework that allows us to define what is our preferred future that we want, and then to pull it towards us, right, starting from the end. But how do you do that? That's where foresight comes in. This is a tool that I wanted to leave with you, and I found very helpful in our work and applying it to entrepreneurship. Future is complex, but really, it's really not that complex, because to understand future is to understand change, and to understand change is to understand drivers of change. Foresight is an academic tool for doing that. And then once we have those drivers with different combination of drivers, you could create different scenarios for the future, one of which you define as your preferred scenario. So this way, you have an end goal, and then you try to influence the drivers to nudge them towards your preferred future. And so that's a tool of foresight that futurists use. Now, if you are to join the Foresight Club, there's a few rules that you need to know. Rule number 1 is that you do not talk about predicting the future. Rule number 2, you do not talk about predicting the future. This is probably the most annoying thing you could ask any futurist about predicting the future, because this is really not what they're doing. What they're doing is to understand the fact that there are multiple alternative futures, and you're just trying to kind of set the stage for what different drivers and scenarios could create those different futures. The other rule is that the future is not predestined. We have agency. And I know there are people, maybe they don't believe that, but we have agency for our industry especially. And if you have someone who believes in that and is also an optimist, that's when you get entrepreneurs who do something really crazy despite all the odds, and then they go and succeed too at times. The other rule is that technology is a huge part of the future, but it's not everything. And this is a common mistake that entrepreneurs make. I'm an engineer myself. Often we really focus on technology. We think that's the answer for everything. But In our industry, we're talking about regulatory shifts, societal acceptance of different things, and a lot of things that you don't even control. Those are external factors that could decide the fate of a technology, and timing also is a huge part of that. The other rule is that you need to immerse people in the future, in the present. You being at this event is a version of that, in exposing yourself to things that are in the future, but you see them today. So you could start to kind of make this extension from present to the future. There are pockets of the future in the present. You may have seen this from a quote from William Gibson that said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. It's the same thing when you travel to a place, when you think, wow, I've never seen things like that before, but you could see how this is going to come to your city in a few years, right? And there's also places that you travel, it's like, yeah, I remember this from a few years ago from where you live. And finally, the future favors the bold. This is really important because risk-taking is a huge part of this. So if you have the knowledge of an insider and you have the perspective of an outsider and you have tools from foresight, how can you apply that as an entrepreneur, as a decision maker for innovation? The framework that we have used and I've created has 3 steps. First, you lean into your ability as an insider to really understand the problem at hand. Second, you move on to remove yourself, liberate yourself from the burden of that experience to think of solutions for that same problem. And then third, you have to also apply foresight to see, okay, well, what is the preferred future that we're trying to create with this solution? And then you build your way back into actually doing it. So these are the 3 steps. Now, seeing this, I would love to give you 3 examples of how we have done this at my company, Cemvita, along with our team over the past 7 years, creating 3 solutions that are out there right now and being commercialized. So what we did was we started with the problem of we need to reduce our environmental impact. And I'm not just talking about carbon impact, I'm talking also about the overall impact on nature. From that, we started to think like outsiders. At this time, also, I teamed up with my co-founder, Tara, who's also my sister, because she comes from synthetic biology and industrial biotech background. And I found that fascinating, and through talking with each other, we zoomed in on industrial biotech as one of those solutions that its time has come to have an impact in energy transition. So then we moved forward, and we created a vision for a sustainable, nature-inspired future that is enabled by industrial biotech. This idea of natural resource companies of the future, where they have a regenerative relationship with nature that is enabled by industrial biotech. First, we looked at the advancement in synthetic biology, and we created a platform where we could use carbon waste, including CO2, and feed that into our optimized microbes that then produce a sustainable oil. This sustainable oil then could be used as an alternative to palm oil and for solutions such as sustainable aviation fuel. We actually got a contract from United Airlines, which is the biggest one they have done yet, for supply of sustainable aviation fuel to them over 20 years. So this is the future of biomanufacturing, where you don't need land, you don't need fertilizer, you do it in a biorefinery, and you could use carbon waste as a feedstock. Second solution called Gold H2. Here we're talking about turning reservoir into a bioreactor, this natural bioreactor that already exists, and then we introduce a package of microbes and nutrients that then in turn could use the unrecovered hydrocarbons as their feedstock to produce hydrogen that then we bring to surface. So this is subsurface biomanufacturing of natural hydrogen. And the third solution is a company that today is called Endolith. It's in the mining sector for sustainable biomining. Basically, microbes that could liberate copper and lithium from low-grade ore. And they do a better job than using acids in the leaching process. So this is something that is being commercialized as we speak. I believe that our decisions, our experiments, and our investments is really what creates the future. It's really up to us, and this is good news. And it's not limited to our industry. I think we could create a future where a lot of nature-inspired solutions could exist, such as microbial fuel cells, animal-free proteins, fertilizer-free agriculture, and biological data storage and computing, which I think is the ultimate solution to this data storage power usage that everyone talks about. So we need this mindset, we need these solutions to be able to fight the issue ahead of us, which is climate change. We could combine the technical knowledge and expertise of an insider, perspective of an outsider with bold foresight to do it. I just want to leave you with two things. One is to remember foresight as a very powerful tool that I think we should use more broadly in our industry. And then the second thing is that you don't have to leave the industry to be an outsider, because to be an outsider is really a mindset. Thank you so much.